People thought it was too cold.
Yeah, it was too cold, but it's okay.
And there would be the wind noise interference.
So it was just, I walked in, I'm like, oh, that's nice. Oh, how is everybody doing?
Doing well.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Welcome, everybody. I see Rita and Bonnie. I guess that's Terry, Tipora. Hi, Mira. Hi, Lana.
Hi.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Bella.
Hi.
Cynthia.
Hi.
Maya.
Hi.
And hi, Gittel. So nice to see you all on this wonderful
me.
day.
You didn't say hi.
Who?
Leona?
I did. You didn't hear me, Leona. I'll say it again. Hello,
No,
Leona.
I thought, oh
No, we did not leave you out. Welcome, Leona.
no.
Are you enjoying this?
Hi,
Hi, Mira. Are you
Hello,
enjoying
Yivkali.
Hi, Rita. Are you enjoying the weather?
No.
I do. I don't mind.
I love it.
I love it.
A little change of scenery.
Yeah, a little different than hot weather.
It depends, I guess, on what you're. Some people run away from the cold. Some people embrace the cold. It's
If
a
you
lot of.
we take into consideration what's going on in New York, so we enjoying this weather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My brother, he's 22. He's in California studying in a yeshiva this year, and he writes on our family WhatsApp. He says, "I wrote that my kids would love to see snow because my kids are all jealous of their cousins who are making snowmen." So he writes, "How come I don't miss this?" I said, I said to him, "It's a sign that you've reached adulthood. If you don't miss the snow, you've become an official adult."
They've had some snow in Los Angeles, and so I don't know where he is in California.
He's in LA.
But he should be able to see the snow on the San Gabriel
That's his point. He's not missing it.
Mountains.
So let's warm up our hearts and our minds and our whole beings with the warmth of Torah. Welcome, Abby. So we are let's start with our Parshat, Parshat Yitro. We're in the second book of Shemos. Let's do our song. Bereshis Noach lech lecha vayirach ha'isara toldos. Bereshis Noach lech lecha vayirach ha'isara toldos. Vayitze vayishva vayeshev miketz vayigash vayechi. Book number 2. Shemos va'era bo b'shalach Yitro. That's our parsha. Mishpatim. Shemos va'era bo b'shalach Yitro. Mishpatim. Teruma tetzaveh kisisa vayakel pekudei. Thank you for singing with me, Bella. Now I'm
My terrible.
At least you tried. The only way you're gonna learn it is if you try.
The only thing I know is bo, bo, bo.
Oh, but that's my favorite one. Listen, when I taught it to my 5th grade students and when I used to teach in New York, they came in and they finished the year, they knew it by heart. That's why I know it by heart.
That's the only way to learn.
They get every single day. So you could sing it every day without me. This is an interesting parsha, like all of them. Specifically, the name of the parsha is always interesting to know why is it that name, right? There are certain parshas that very often the name of the parsha is connected to the first word of the parsha. Sometimes we have a parsha that's named after a person. Like, which parsha do you know that's named after a person?
Yitro.
Well, Yisro is the one today, but
Prophets. The prophets are all named after, like Hosea.
no, the parsha.
Noah?
The life of Sarah.
Yeah, Noah. Parsha Bereshis, Noah. Noah is named after Noah because that's the portion of Noah.
Sarah.
Say again.
Chaya Sarah.
Very good. Parshas Chaya Sarah. Shemos v'era bo Bereshis Noach lech lecha v'era Chaya Sarah. The life of Sarah. Chaya Sarah is Avram's wife, Sarah.
Maybe can you define what a Parshat is then? So it's not a book. Or a chapter.
No.
Parsha.
What are we singing every week? This Chumash.
I don't know.
This
I'm
Chumash.
seeing it, but I mean,
Glad you asked.
I
This
have-
Chumash, which is exactly identical to the Torah, it's in the Torah scroll right behind the ark right behind me, is a Torah scroll is divided into how many chapters? How many chapters are there in the whole Chumash?
No,
Yeah,
chapters?
52.
52. Very good. We read one every week. These 52 parshas are subdivided or at least titled into how many books? How many books in the Torah are there?
5 books.
Very good. 5 books of the Torah,
Zippy.
right? This is our table of contents. Book
Right.
number 1 is Bereshis. Book number 2 is Shemos. Book number 3 is Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. And then the parshas are the sub ones, the names of the individual portions. The word parsha actually means a portion.
Oh,
So Bereshis portion 1, Noach is portion 2, Lech Lecha is portion 3. So it's book 1, portion 3. We're now in book 2, Shemos, portion Shemos Ve'era Bo B'Shach Yisro, portion 5. You got it, Leona?
Yep, got it
Good.
now.
Okay, so Parshas Yisro begins on page 458. For those of you that have this Chumash. For those that don't have one, I encourage you to buy one or to borrow one from Chabad. We'd be happy to loan it to you. Very important to have a Chumash in your home. Okay, so why is this week's Parsha named after Yisro? Who is Yisro anyway?
Father-in-law of Moses.
Very good. He's the father-in-law of Moses. When Moshe was running away from Paro, and Paro wanted to kill him after he killed the Egyptian, he met his wife. Who was his wife?
Zipporah, that's her father.
Zipporah, very good, in Midian. And he marries Zipporah, and he has 2 sons. What are their names? It's in the I believe-
Gershon,
Gershom. Look in verse number 3. What are the names of his wife is Zipporah, and what are his children's name? Gershom and
wait, who is he the father-in-law of?
Yitro's father was Moses.
Of Moses, okay.
Marries Yitro's daughter Zipporah, and they have 2 children, Gershom and look in verse number 4. What was the second one's name? Come on, you can find it.
Eliezer?
Very good, Eliezer.
Eliezer, yeah.
And it says why? Gershom, because he was a stranger in a foreign land. He was a stranger in a foreign land. And Eliezer, because Hashem rescued him. El represents Hashem, Ezer is help. Hashem helped him from the sword of Paro. So what's fascinating is that this week's Torah portion, even though it's named Parshas Yisro, after Moshe's father-in-law, and that's a whole discussion on its own of why is an entire parsha named after him. Because what happened is Yisro, when he heard what happened to the Jewish people, that they were receiving the Torah and that they split the sea was split, the whole story, he decided to leave all his idol worship that he believed in, and he came over to the desert. He became a convert. And he became an integral part of the Jewish people. And it discusses how once Moshe was teaching Torah to the Jewish people, how he gave advice. Yisro's story is fascinating. But if we were to say what is probably one of the most fascinating things that actually happened in this parsha, what is it? Anybody know what happened in this week's parsha? Or let's look for a second. What happened in last week's parsha, in Parshas Beshalach? What was our topic last week? In
Then
Parshas-
we left Egypt.
the Jewish people left Egypt and they're on their way to receive the Torah. What happens in Parshas Yisro?
Isn't that when the courts get established?
That happens after the,
Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah.
very good. They reach the desert and they actually receive the Torah. Now, you're right about about the appointments of the courts and the judges, which we're not going to discuss today. As I say this every week, that if you break apart the Parsha, you could spend hours studying each Parsha because there's so many different parts to the Parsha. But today we're going to talk about the actual giving of the Torah, which happens in our Parsha, this Parsha right here. Which holiday celebrates this Parsha?
Shavuot.
Shavuot. The holiday that celebrates the few parshas that we just passed, which was the parsha of the holiday of Pesach, right? Celebrates the leaving of Egypt. 7 weeks later, on the holiday of Shavuot, we have the ice cream and the cheesecake. That is celebrating the giving of the Torah, which happened 7 weeks after the Jewish people leave Egypt. So they're counting at Mount Sinai, and if you just spin through your pages, page 465, read the topics that they camp by the mountain, and Hashem chooses the Jewish people on his own, and they have a preparation. And you go finally, page 471, chapter 20, we begin with Hashem says, or gives over, what does he give over?
10 Commandments.
10 Commandments. Very good, Abby. See, Abby, I still recognize your voice, even though I don't see you. It's almost like the 10 Commandments. It says that in the preparation for the commandments, we saw the thunder and heard the lightning. That's a fascinating topic on its own. What's the Jewish string theory? Anyways, without getting set aside, the 10 Commandments are given in this Torah portion. Now, today, everybody, Jews and non-Jews alike, everybody knows about the 10 Commandments. They even made a movie about it, right? You know my opinion on these movies.
Yes.
You know my opinion already, right? When Jewish content is made in a non-Jewish movie or from not a Jewish source, sometimes Jews themselves know more details about things that are incorrect from the movie instead of looking into the real book. I don't know about the movie, but I could tell you one thing, that today the 10 Commandments continue to shape and serve as the foundation for our lives today. So we are going to explore what was so dramatic about the 10 Commandments that brought about everlasting results. So do you know that years ago, the Talmud tells us that the Jewish people used to repeat the 10 Commandments every single day as part of their daily prayers, which is interesting, right? We say the Shema, which we repeat the part when the Jewish people left Egypt every day in our prayers. But when the Jewish people started to disperse, leave the land of Israel, the custom was to abolish saying the 10 Commandments every day, because it would fuel heretics that believed that maybe the only part of Judaism that needed to be kept was the 10 Commandments. In other words, if you say the 10 Commandments every day, then people would think that's all you have to keep. So we stopped repeating it as like a mantra to show that this is not the only thing, the whole Torah needs to be kept. So, and there's even a thing that Maimonides writes. He has like a whole book of questions and answers that we shouldn't rise during the reading of the 10 Commandments, because it would sort of attribute like a greater importance to the 10 Commandments. Now, this is a little bit interesting. Everybody knows about the 10 Commandments. So it's more important or it's not more important. So,
Rivka, why does it have to be more important or less important? Why can't it be equally important?
absolutely. That's exactly our conversation, is that it's equally important. That's why it shouldn't be read every day as the 10 Commandments. In other words, when you read something every day, that shows that there's importance to it, right? It gives like a level of like value. Why not read all 613 mitzvahs every day? Why the 10? That is exactly the point. In other words, everybody knows about the 10 Commandments. And we're going to talk about that today, the value and the beauty and the understanding of why the 10 Commandments set such a element in our lives. But the questions that we're asking are there 10 more important mitzvahs in the 10 Commandments than all the other ones? So it's funny, my mother, when we were growing up, she always used to tell us it says in the Aseret, it was a joke in our family. She made up one. She said, Al tishaker, you're not allowed to lie. No such a thing. That's not one of the 10 commandments. It's one of the prohibitions in the Torah that you're not allowed to lie, but it's not one of the 10 commandments. She would always say, don't lie to me. It says it in the 10 commandments. We're like, Mom, it doesn't say it in the 10 commandments. So it became like a family joke, that she could have sold us a boat that it said in the 10 commandments, but it wasn't. She was trying, in other words, it was her way. I gotta tell her that. It was her way of basically instilling in us an extra measure of don't lie to me. It's one of the 10 commandments. It's not. So there's in Western civilization, there's a certain emphasis on the 10 commandments. People will give over to their children, or that's one of the 10 commandments. People refer to it that's the ultimate. Those are the 10 most important ones, to the degree that my mother made one up just to give it equal importance. But the Jewish perspective, that's indicated from the Talmud that says that we stop reading the 10 commandments every day, is that the 10 commandments don't carry any more weight than the rest of the mitzvahs. The rest of the mitzvahs have to be observed with the same passion and with the same level of observance. So if the 10 commandments are not more important, then what makes them more special? And in fact, is there a difference of the 10 commandments and the rest of the Torah and the mitzvahs? And if there isn't, then why did Hashem particularly choose to communicate with the Jewish people for the very first time through these 10 commandments? In other words, if they're not so special, why these? What makes these 10 commandments unique? So, it's interesting. We use in English the word 10 commandments very loosely. But how do we say the 10 commandments in Hebrew?
Aseret mitzvot.
No.
Mhm.
Aseret, the 10. You know?
Utterances.
Very good. Utterances, or hadibrot. Aseret hadibrot, the 10 statements, so to speak. In fact, the translation of 10 commandments gives an impression that it's just a list of 10 mitzvahs. 10 of the mitzvahs out of the 613. But according to, first of all, it's 10 statements. Number one, Aseret hadibrot, yudaber, to speak. But one of the commentaries even say that the first one is not even a mitzvah. It's actually a prerequisite for the acceptance of all mitzvahs, right? Because the first one, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, number one. That's the prerequisite before we begin. Conversely, there are certain dibrot, some of the 10 commandments that contain more than one mitzvah. For example, the dibra of the 5th commandment about keeping Shabbos. What does it say? Zachar es Yom HaShabbos L'kacho. That's, remember that this day is holy. We express that through the reciting of Kiddush. And then it says, Shamar, guard yourself from working. That's another prohibition. So the commandments, do you hear an echo? Do you hear someone else talking? Yeah.
Yes.
Yocheved's next door learning in her online class. Let me ask her to move. Hold on one second.
Why is the camera
Okay. Sorry about that. So in the 5th commandment, we see that there's the element of two of the prohibitions about Shabbos, two of the mitzvahs of Shabbos is within that 5th commandment. So in order to understand, you understand what I'm saying? So it's not a list of 10 mitzvahs that are, okay, these 10 were chosen for Hashem to start off the communication about the Jewish people. So in order for us to understand the specialty and the importance and the uniqueness of the Aseret HaDibrot, there's 3 questions I want to begin with. First of all, what language did Hashem use in the 10 commandments? Second of all, who exactly was Hashem giving the 10 commandments to? Third of all, you're familiar that there were certain laws that are known as the 7 no-hide laws, right? That laws that go across the board to non-Jews, the entire world. Some of the 7 no-hide laws are also in the 10 Commandments.
Well, this is where I get confused with the 7, and there's no such thing in the Torah, the 7 Noahide laws. There's the 10 Commandments. God didn't say here, these are for you, and then the 7 Noahide laws. I think that was added later by Rabbanim, but I don't see that in the Torah. That's not the 7 Noahide laws.
Well,
That's
first
not
of
in the what I'm
the,
saying, the 5 books.
the source for the 7 no-hide laws were combined by the Talmud as these being the 7 no-hide laws. But the source of the 7 no-hide laws are clearly in the Torah. But the binding set of the 7 no-hide laws are
Where,
written.
can you tell me the source of
They're-
that?
yeah,
Because,
I'll send it to you. It's written in the Talmud.
well, that's not the Torah.
Of course, it's the Torah. It's written.
I mean-
The actual source of those 7 mitzvos are in the Torah. The binding of them as these unique 7 ones are in the Talmud.
Right, they're all the 7 no.
So why is it that Hashem say
These are only for the goyim. Yeah. Okay. No.
these are for the entire world, for Gentiles and Jews alike? 7 no-hide laws. But then comes the 10 Commandments, and he like almost repeats certain ones that were already said in the 7 no-hide laws. Like, for example, don't kill. Right? Why repeat them in the 10 Commandments? In other words, it seems like there's something interesting going on. That part of the 7 no-hide laws are repeated in the 10 Commandments and part aren't. So we're going to take a look at 3 different readings and explanations about the 10 Commandments that will explain a lot more. By the way, before we continue, do you know what the 10 Commandments are? Let's take a second and just read it inside the Chumash. It begins with on page 473. So in verse number 2,
What's the,
chapter 20. So first one is Anochi Hashem leikecha asher tesis chameres v'tzarim beis havada. First of all, I am your God. Belief in one God. Number 2, you shall not possess an idol. No idol worship. Verse number 4, you should not make for yourself a sculpted image or any. That's I believe part of number 3. The whole 3, 4, and 5 discusses idol worship. Verse number not making a sculpted image is number 3. Not taking Hashem's name in vain, that's verse number 7. You can't say Hashem's name in vain. Verse number 8, remembering Shabbos. That's the first 5 commandments. And then if you turn, I'm skipping over verses. No, I apologize. Verse number 1 is I am Hashem your God. Verse number 2 is about idol worship. Verse number 3 about saying Hashem's name in vain. Verse number 4 about keeping Shabbos. Verse number 5, if you look on commandment number 5, if you look at verse number 12, honor your father and mother. Those are the first 5. Then you shall not murder. Verse number 13, you shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You're with me?
Yes.
Those are the 10 commandments. Okay. Now, there's a midrash in Tanchuma on Parshat Yitro that says as follows. Why is it that Hashem started off the 10 commandments with the word, what's the first word of the 10 commandments?
I'm your God.
Do you know it in Hebrew?
Right.
Anybody could read the Hebrew? Anochi. You ever heard that? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. What does the word Anochi mean? Well, if I tell you it starts with Anochi, then and you know it in English, what's Anochi?
One.
Not one, Anochi I. Anoichi, I, Hashem, and Hashem, Elokecha, your God. The word Anoichi means I. Now, how come so many of you don't know what the word Anoichi means? Not because you don't speak Hebrew.
Because only Hashem is Anochi. I am not.
No, but why don't you know what the translation is? Because Anoichi is an Egyptian word. Anoichi is an Egyptian word. And the Medrash asks, why is that? Why is it that Hashem, who's about to give these 10 important utterances, starts off with an Egyptian word? So I'll read to you an interesting Medrash. Listen carefully. To what can this be compared? To a mortal king's son who was captured and spent a long time with his captors. When his father took revenge upon the enemies and brought him back, he tried to speak to him in his native tongue, but his son did not understand. What did the king do? He began to speak to him in the language of his captors. Hashem acted in a similar fashion with the Jewish people. During the many years that the Jewish people were in Egypt, they learned the language of the Egyptians. When Hashem redeemed them and gave them the Torah, they did not understand. Therefore, Hashem says, I will speak with them in Egyptian. Anoichi, for when a man wishes to say the word I in Egyptian, he says Anoichi. Therefore, Hashem opened with the word Anoichi.
I have a question.
Yes.
I remember when we were learning, one of the things that the Jews kept in Egypt was our language. So why is Hashem speaking to us in Egyptian?
Excellent question. There's the famous Midrash. Took the words out of my mouth. I was going to bring you the questions. Thank you, Tzipora, for asking it. There's a famous Midrash that one of the reasons that the Jewish people merited the redemption from Egypt was because they had an ability to maintain their language. In fact, it wasn't just their language. It says there were 3 things that the Jews merited to redemption of Egypt. They kept their Jewish names. They kept their Jewish clothing. They didn't wear the Egyptian clothing, and they kept their Jewish language. So did they know Hebrew or not know Hebrew? If one of the reasons they were redeemed from Egypt was because they kept the Jewish language, how is it that they didn't know Hebrew? And how do we reconcile these 2 midrashim, these 2 commentaries? By the way, in general, within Torah, many times you'll get different commentaries that may seem at contradiction with each other. But really, we try to solidify and to unify anything that's unnecessary to be a contradiction, and to see, are they really a contradiction? So if the Jewish people couldn't understand Hebrew, then, in other words, if they understood Hebrew, why one word? Just one word, Anoichi, in Egyptian. And if they didn't understand Hebrew, then why not all the Aseres HaDibros in Egyptian? Well, he thinks that they can understand all of them except one word. Why only the first word, Anoichi? And finally, by the Aseres HaDibros, by the Mount Sinai, when the Jewish people are, so to speak, formally introduced to Hashem in all of his glory, this was going to be the mark of the first time that the Jewish people marked the start of their relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. So it seems strange that something that was going to be like the beginning of this relationship, that Hashem would introduce himself in Egyptian. It's like the language of an immoral nation, an idolatrous nation. They enslaved and tortured the Jewish people for hundreds of years. So, and by the way, another problem that we have with the text is that if you look inside the pasuk, inside the verse, he says, look at page 471, chapter 20, verse number 1. It says, God spoke all of the 10 commandments, right? And the Jewish people responded, yes. Vaydaber Hashem. The English confuses me. I'm looking inside the Hebrew. I don't see how it's verse number 1. God spoke, Vaydaber Hashem as kol hadvarim ha'eleh. God spoke all. See, it's so interesting. Doesn't have it in the English. Drives me crazy. The English, it's good because it allows those of us that don't speak Hebrew to learn. But sometimes the English translation, it literally like skips out nuances that are so valuable. Anybody here read Hebrew? Read Hebrew? A little bit. So let me just, I just want to show you something interesting. In the English, it says, God spoke all. He's about to say the 10 Commandments. In the Hebrew, listen carefully. It says, Vayidaber Elokim, and Hashem said, Es kol hadvarim ha'ela, all of these things. He's about to say the 10 Commandments. Lamar, saying. Okay, what's the big deal? Hashem's about to say the 10 Commandments. Why are we nitpicking on the words? Doesn't even say it in the English, the word lamar. For anyone who's learned Chumash, lamar is a very, very common word. The word lamar means to say. In what context is it used? Anytime Hashem speaks to Moshe or anybody, and he tells him to repeat it to another person, it says lamar. Moshe lamar. You'll find that thousands of times in the Chumash, in the Psukim. Hashem, and Hashem said, lamar, saying. Anytime it uses the word saying, it's as if Hashem is saying it to one person that they should say it to another. You understand? Mm-hmm. So why is it that it doesn't make sense? Because we have a question. Hashem is now speaking directly to the Jewish people. He's saying the 10 Commandments now, and he's saying it for the future. Why is it using the word lamar? It's another additional question that we have. And a final question, throwing you out all the questions first, and then we're going to answer. And a final, isn't it amazing? We're like looking at one verse, and we have so many questions. And a final question is that why are, I told you what the 3 original questions are, but I'm expounding on them. The first original question we had was why the Anochi? Why this Egyptian word? The second was, who is he speaking to? Why the use of the word lamar? Is he speaking directly, or is he speaking to someone else who's going to speak to the Jewish people? And the third question is, again, about the Noahide laws. Why are some of them written as part of the Noahide laws and not all of them? So the question about the Noahide laws is,
what are the Noahide laws?
what I'll give you the list.
Yeah, because I just don't know exactly. I know Shabbos is not going to be in there. That's obvious.
Yeah, I'll tell you the whole list of the Noahide laws.
I looked it up and I still don't understand what they are. You're going to tell them to us, but what are they actually?
Okay, so I don't want to spend so much time on it, but I'll just tell them to you. Establishing laws, to actually have courts and judges, to have like a place of laws. No cursing God. No practicing idolatry, right? No serving other idols. No adultery. No or illicit sexuality, which is its own discussion. No killing, no stealing, and no eating flesh from a living animal. So a few of these are in the 10 Commandments, but not all of them. Is Hashem trying to repeat something? What's going on here? So these 3 questions that we just asked, why Anochi, who is he talking to, and about the Noahide laws, is going to unlock for us a special, the special potency of the Aseret HaDibros. We're trying to understand what is so special and unique about the Aseret HaDibros. So in order to understand the profound effect that the Aseret HaDibros had on each person that heard it, we need to take a moment to explore a very interesting concept, which is, what does it mean to be a Jew? The definition of a Jew is going to help us understand what the Aseret HaDibros is all about. So I'm going to read to you another verse from the Talmud, which is fascinating. I want you to listen carefully, okay? The school of Eliyahu taught, this is from the Talmud, the world has an existence of 6,000 years. Did you ever hear this before? By the way, we're in year 5781. Just keep that in mind. A 2,000-year era of spiritual emptiness, a 2,000-year era of Torah, and a 2,000-year era during which the days of Mashiach will begin. However, due to our many transgressions, time has already gone by without the arrival of Mashiach. When did the 2,000-year era of Torah begin? If you start counting at the giving of the Torah, you do not have a full 2,000 years. You only have 1,000 and part of the second. Rather, begin with the verse and the souls that Abraham created in Haran, for we had learned that Abraham was 52 at the time. Okay, that's the Midrash. That's from the Talmud. Now, this 6,000-year period, right? I don't have my timeline on me, but what? Let's say world was created, right? Adam was created, that's year 0. Noah was in the year 1056, about 1,000 years later. Avraham was in the year 1948. When was the Torah given?
2448.
Good job, Gifta, look at you. The year 2448. So if it says that the Torah begins, it says the first 1,000 years, 2,000 years, just spiritual emptiness. The second 2,000 years is the Torah. And the third 2,000 years is when it's going to start the coming of Mashiach, which that's the time period that we're in now. Well, let's backtrack a second. When did the 2,000 years of Torah begin? If the Torah
4,000.
and 2448 we're 50 years too short. So the Talmud tells us that the Torah begins, the 2,000-year era begins when Avram started to create souls. Avram was 52 at the time. So if Avram was born in 1948, when he was 52 years old, it was the year 2000. Understand? So it's obvious that even though the actual Torah was given, the actual Torah was given 448 years after Avram made souls, the Torah looks at the era of Torah from when the time that Avram made souls. Do you understand what I'm saying? I know it's a little bit hard when you don't have it in writing. So
Yeah.
So go on.
2,000 years, the first 2,000 years, incorporate, right? The world was created, Noah, Avram, got me? That's the first 2,000 years. The second 2,000 years in 2448, so we're talking 48 years, 448 years, like in the middle of 2000s, the Torah was given. So we're missing 448 years, understand? It's supposed to start at the beginning of the 2000s. Why was it given 448 years later? How does that, understand the question? The Torah tells us, the Talmud tells us, it started at the 2000s. It started when Avram began creating souls. It started in the year 2000. Avram, what was in the year 2000? Avram is at the age of 52 years old and he's creating souls, whatever that means.
Well, that's the question probably people wonder is, what do you mean by creating souls? Was he having kids or was he converting people?
Very good question.
Yeah, let's convert.
What is this idea of Hashem, of Avram creating souls? But regardless, and we're going to get to it in a second, is Torah according to the Talmud. If the Torah is saying that Torah is first 2,000 years are spiritual emptiness, the next 2,000 years are Torah, the Torah era begins not from when the Torah was given, but from Avram. Avram is the beginning of the Torah era. You're with me? A little bit more clear on some level?
Who decides these things?
Say again?
Who decides these things? I mean, it's.
Well, we just read it from the Talmud,
Oh.
which is its own discussion on it.
So, okay, yeah.
So the following, so what began at that point in time, when Avram was creating souls, whatever that means, which we'll talk about, this obviously mirrored events at Mount Sinai. Okay, because let's continue further, and I think there'll be a lot more clarity. So first of all, let's understand, how does this revelation at the time of Mount Sinai, when Hashem is giving us the 10 Commandments and the Torah, how is this, so to speak, a continuation or a fulfillment of Avram and Sarah, who were not born Jewish, became Jewish, and helped others to become so? Okay, so like Sephora asked, what does this mean, the souls that they were making in Haran? What was going on? What's this referring to? So Rashi at that time, because in the Torah it says that they were making souls in Haran. Rashi says what was going on. So Rashi says that when Avram taught the men and Sarah taught the woman, it says that they created souls. They were teaching them about monotheism, right? Because in that time, nobody believed in one God. So that's what it means that they were making souls. They were teaching people about Hashem. Okay. Now, regarding the significance of conversion, it says that he was creating souls in Haran, but then it says specifically what was going on when it no, it says that they the Torah tells us that when the Jewish people officially, it says that there are 3 acts in the Torah that allow a Jew to enter into a covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. Immersion in a mikvah, which we know that today if somebody who wants to convert needs to immerse in a mikvah. There's a certain sacrifice that's offered, and there's circumcision. So we have to understand that right now, the Jewish people, when they're coming to the foot of the mountain, are they Jewish or not Jewish? Yes or no?
Oh,
They're not
Well,
Jewish.
They're not Jewish because they didn't have the circumcision. Men,
Wait,
at least.
They had the circumcision. Remember, they were supposed to have that.
Oh, yeah, they did have the circumcision. Yeah. Oh.
So, but are they Jewish?
The moment they took the Torah, they became Jewish.
Okay, so what happened when the Jewish people received the Torah? That time period wasn't only a time when they received the Torah, that is a time that they actually converted to Judaism. Did you know that? We all became Jewish people at the foot of the mountain.
How
So
come
we
there was no
weren't-
mikvah then?
what are you
Hold
doing
Hold on,
with
one
that?
second. Let me finish my thought. So this is one of the reasons the Talmud counts the era of Torah from the 2,000-year period when Avram was creating souls, because by Avram converting people to monotheism, he was in effect beginning this process of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, which all his descendants would at that point convert to Judaism. But this obviously brings up a very fundamental question, is that what do we mean when we say that Avram was converting people to Judaism? Was there even a notion of a Jew at this point in time? Was Avram a Jew? And if he was he as Jewish as the people who accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai? Did he possess a Jewish soul? It's confusing. Now you can ask me your questions before I continue.
I have a question.
Yes, Bonnie.
Could you circle back to what your original premise was before you started your explanations? Because I'm understanding what you're saying, but I'm not hooking this together with what you said initially because I can't remember.
Okay, so let me recap. I know we're talking about a lot of concepts that don't seem to connect. So let's
recap. Right, a recap would be really good. What's the thread that's bringing this all together?
Okay, we started off by saying, why are the 10 Commandments special? That was our original question. Why are the 10 Commandments special? Are they more special than the other mitzvahs? Yes or no? They're not more special in the sense that they're just 10 other mitzvahs. but they're obviously unique because that's the way Hashem decided to communicate to the Jewish people for the first time. Then we went on to discuss that the 10 commandments are not even 10 mitzvahs, they're 10 statements. And we started off by asking that in order for us to understand the importance and the uniqueness of the 10 commandments, we're going to ask and answer 3 questions that's going to allow us to understand the uniqueness of the 10 commandments. Question number 1, which language? Hashem used the word Anaychi in Egyptian. Did they know Hebrew? According to some of the Medrash, they knew Hebrew because that's one of the reasons that they were redeemed. If they knew Hebrew, then why speak in Egyptian? If they didn't know Hebrew, then why not say it all in Egyptian? That's question 1. Question number 2, who is Hashem giving the commandments to? It says the word lamar. It says that he said by lamar to say. Who is he talking to? Did Hashem give it or was he saying it to someone else? Question number 3, why are some of the no-hide laws part of the 10 commandments and not all of them? So by asking these 3 questions, we're going to answer these 3 questions. And by answering these 3 questions, we're going to understand the uniqueness of the 10 commandments. Then we moved on to say that in order for us to understand the uniqueness of the 10 commandments, we're first going to explore a new topic. What is the new topic? The essence of a Jew. What makes a Jew a Jew? Then we started to talk about this interesting medrash, how it divides up the times. The first 2,000 years is going to be spiritual emptiness. The second 2,000 years is going to be Torah. And the third will be the start of the coming of Mashiach. So we were discussing how could it be that the Torah starts in the year 2000 if it was given in the year 2448? The medrash says that it starts from Avram. When Avram started to convert all these souls, that began the process of Torah. But we're having a conversation about it. How is it possible that it started with Avram if Avram was even Jewish? What does it mean that he's converting to Judaism? Why is this whole era of Torah starting with Avram if it began before the Torah was actually given? That's where we're holding. Does that explain it, Bonnie?
Yeah,
Good.
thank you.
You're welcome. I know we're talking about a lot of different things, but I just needed to center. Any other questions before we continue?
Can you just spell the word no hide?
No-hide comes from the word Noach, which or
Okay.
Noah. Noah,
Oh,
Noahide.
okay. What does it mean?
I looked it up. You can actually look it up on Google. It's there if you want to read about it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I have it. Because I didn't know what it was either.
Go ahead,
I have a question.
please.
As we know, Abraham knew Torah, so Torah existed before.
Now you're going deep. All right. You're right. I'm going to get there. Can I continue?
Yeah.
So, I know it's a lot. So let's first see how this revelation at Sinai was the continuation and the fulfillment of the process that Avram and Sarah started, who were not born Jewish and became Jewish. So okay. So in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, we left off with the question: was Avram even Jewish? We say that it's all starting with him, but was there even a notion of a Jew at this point in time? Now Bella asks a good question: didn't Avram know Torah? Says that Avram, and in fact, not just Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, all our patriarchs and matriarchs kept a lot of the mitzvahs. In fact, Sarah was the first one to make challah, to light the Shabbos candle. She had the cloud over her head. When was it? It was given after their time. So in Tanya, for those that study Tanya in chapter 2, this is one of the fundamental things. The Tanya explains that the second unique Jewish soul that every Jew possesses that makes them Jewish is Chelak Elokah Mimah Mamash. It's an actual part of Hashem. And it says, what's the source for the Alter Rebbe saying this in the Tanya? He says that Hashem blew it into Adam's nostrils, right? We know that if you open up when Hashem was creating Adam in Genesis, we're not going to open it right now. It says that Hashem blew a soul into Adam. When it says blow, right, we know that you could talk for many hours, but you can't blow for many hours because when you blow, it comes from your insides. So when Hashem blew a life into Adam, he was blowing an actual part of himself into mankind. So Adam has a soul, according to Tanya. Was Adam Jewish? No. So who was the first Jew? And if he had a soul, what makes him different than Avram, who also had a soul? What makes my soul different than a non-Jew soul? It's complicated stuff, huh? So by way of analogy, let's explain the fundamental difference between, let's say, a robot and a living being. Today with the artificial intelligence, forget it. But even with all of that, right? Let's talk for a moment about a robot. A robot possesses a motor or a computer within it that acts, so to speak, as its soul, as its life force, right? It's the one that creates the movement, the reactions, etc. And it also has physical parts to it, the metal, the plastic, everything that makes up the robot, that makes up the robot's body. So you can say that there's two components to the robot. There's the body, the metal, the plastic, and then there's the soul, the computer that's making it happen. And you could say that, that's what makes up every living being as well. Whether it's a plant, an animal, a human being, every living being possesses a soul, a life force, and a body. What's the difference between the way which the body and the soul of the robot interact with each other compared to the way the body and the soul of a person interact? And this distinction, by the way, is what actually sets a living being apart from a robot or any machine for that matter. The motor of the soul, the motor or the soul of the robot, it can cause intelligence, it can cause movement, but the motor doesn't have a real connection to the body. The robotic body, the body of the robot, and the motor, they remain two distinct entities. The metals and the plastics, they comprise of the body of the robot, like the inanimate parts of it, and they don't change in any way, shape, or form as a result of the fact that the motor is attached to them. They, so to speak, remain dead. They remain plastic. They remain metal. So essentially, in a robot, there's no union between the body of the robot and the soul of the robot. So even if you were to consider that the motor of the robot is as intelligent, the brain and the soul of the living being, the robot can never become a living being because there's no soul in it that's unified with the body. Even if it's as smart, right? In contrast, a living body and soul, they're inseparable from each other. It would be incorrect to say that a person's body, their skin, their blood, their bones, their muscles, is inanimate and lifeless, just like the body of the robot. And it's just, being controlled by a soul. We know that that's not true. A living person, their body and their soul are so fused strongly together that their physical flesh actually comes to life. Essentially then, in a human being, the body and its life force are one of the same, right? For somebody that looks at a dead person, why are they not alive?
Isn't it more easy to explain it that the human can make a choice and the robot can't? Is whatever the...
Today with the artificial intelligences, let me just tell you, Chevet, to quiet down. Hold on one second.
Robot is man created. Human is God created. It has a soul. Robot has no soul. It has a program created by man.
They have robots now that they can start thinking for themselves.
No,
It's so
they still programmed like that.
But it's because of the way
yeah,
that
but they start actually beating the program they already put in. So they put in a program, but then the robot starts going above the program. I don't know how to explain it. They start
by the
thinking
way,
for themselves.
yeah, that's what artificial intelligence.
That's what AI is.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Fear of the three most built is that AI will become so intelligent that we as humans will not be able to control what they can reproduce
That's so
mentally.
scary.
It's unbelievable what's coming out today with AI. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
whole world of its own, and it's progressing. It's actually scary. But even with all of it, nobody's going to tell you that they want a relationship with the robot. No one's going to tell you that a robot is alive, because the fundamental difference between the two at the end of the day is that they remain two entities. The motor fuels the robot, as smart as it is. But a human being, the flesh and the body, the soul, all combined. You're one entity, you're one person. Now, with this analogy, we could understand the concept of being Jewish, right? Because when a person has a Jewish soul, that will not, if you just say that there's a soul, my body, a Jewish soul, that's not enough to make a person Jewish. There has to be a union between that Jewish godly soul and the person's physical, biological existence. Without this bond between, just like we explained, then the person remains a Gentile, possessing a Jewish soul. It's like a body of a robot who is not unified with its motor. So in other words, the mere presence of a Jewish soul doesn't make someone Jewish. And therefore, by the way, Adam possessed a Jewish soul, so to speak. He possessed a soul, like it says in Tanya. But his biological, physical being was not Jewish. And this was because at that point in time, when Adam was created, there was no union between the godly soul and the body. So what was Adam? Adam was a Gentile walking around with the Jewish soul. In fact, he possessed all souls that were to be included in mankind. He was the king of all the souls. But during the first 2,000 years of creation, there were other specific individuals that possessed Jewish souls, like Noah, but none of them are considered Jewish. This is what changed with Avram, who we call the father of the Jewish people. There was something unique about Avram compared to Adam. Adam also had a soul. He even had a Jewish soul. It says clearly in the Chumash, Hashem breathed it inside of him. Hashem breathed that soul inside of him. So in Kabbalah, it explains the following. Avram, what made Avram unique? Avram was the first individual to actually unify his godly soul with his biological being, if we can say. He was actually the first one that his body actually revealed and expressed his godly soul. He began the process, even though it was going to take centuries for this fusion between the godly soul and the body to fully develop, because that only happened by the giving of the Torah. From this point in time, the process of being Jewish had begun. You know, perhaps we can say Avram wasn't a Jew, he was Jewish. You know, like something's blue-ish, I'll be there at 5-ish. Avram was Jewish. He began this process of his body expressing the godliness within him, but that only began the process was by Matan Torah. And the whole wonder of the giving of the Torah was that the Torah came down to the people. And Moshe went up to Hashem. There was that first time it says that heaven and earth met, that they kissed each other, that they were able to be intertwined. In fact, it says that Yaakov put on tefillin, but he was able to discard the tefillin after, because the tefillin, the physical body, of the tefillin did not hold any holiness to it. Holiness was not able to attach itself to physicality. Today, if your tefillin are not, if a person's mezuzah, the tefillin or the Torah is not repairable, we bury it. That's why we bury a person. That's why there's no cremation. Because when you bury a person, the body itself, the fact that it housed the soul, it made the body now a holy being forever, making us different than a robot. The body and the soul are so fused together that they're one. So what is it?
What I don't understand is, if Torah came to Moses on Mount Sinai, how Abraham was like way earlier. I mean, how could it?
How did he have the access?
I don't know what that means.
What is your question?
Well, how could Abraham have the Torah when it came through Moses on Mount Sinai?
So it says that our matriarchs and our patriarchs, they had, I mean, let me ask you a bigger question. Jew always responds with the question. How did they talk to God? They lived in a different reality. They knew the Torah and they knew the mitzvahs, but they had no obligation to keep it.
And the thing is that woman first, when it came time to give the Torah to the Jewish people, God told Moses, go speak with the woman first. That's the good part of it. For our
That's another unbelievable
we are superiors.
That's something else. I mean, we're talking like 1,000 years before.
Yeah.
The only explanation is that there was a different reality. But
it's not a different reality in the sense of not like a reality of normalcy. It was the world spiritually was in a different place. And that's why actually we have a very, now that Talmud that we said before, that the 2,000 years, the 2,000 years makes a lot of sense to us. We understand that the world existed in different planes. You know, it's like, I remember as a child asking my teacher, I don't understand how smart individuals believed that idol, like, to me, idol worship is such a weird thing. Like, people really believed that a statue controlled their life. That's crazy. But like, the whole world believed that. Today, we have different struggles. People have the belief and understanding that there's a God in this world is much easier for people to accept today, much easier. Many people believe that there's a higher power. Many people understand that it's not a statue. But in the first 2,000 years of the world, everybody believed in that, in idol worship. It's a crazy thing. The world had different struggles, different realities, different purposes. Doesn't mean that it was a different world. It just was a different. Yeah, that's what I mean by different reality.
I know, I understand that, and for
okay, let's continue. So, by the way, this union that is reflected of the body and soul is actually reflected in the fact that Avram had a bris, he had a circumcision, because in doing so, he was, so to speak, converting his body to Judaism. He was expressing his Jewishness within his flesh. So he was, and by the way, that is exactly what a bris does. It integrates the godly soul within the body to a degree that it was never done before. And this is the reason that the Talmud counts the era of Torah as beginning with Avram, because Avram began the process of becoming Jewish. That began with Avram. And by the way, from this point forward, the Jewish souls are passed on only by a blood relative, right? Because we have to we share the actual physical DNA as the ones that came before us, right? If you, the whole idea of that you are merely Jewish because your mother's Jewish, it's unbelievable on a soul level, and it's unbelievable on a physical level, because your biological DNA allows you to be who you are. And by the way, we'll talk about it in a second about the fact that it's the mother, because the body is grown in the mother's body. But this process continued until the giving of the Torah. And at this point in time, when the Torah was given, this fusion, this union of the body and the godly soul was complete. And this is and from this point in time, when the Jewish people received the Torah, a Jew's physical and biological DNA was completely a Jewish one. The process, so to speak, was complete. And the Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch that when one says the words, Ata v'chartanu mikol ha'amim, we say that in davening on the holidays, and you have chosen us, right? You have chosen us from all the nations. We say that many times in our prayers. This refers to that, he says, this refers to the material body, which is similar to the bodies of the nation of the world. So are we suggesting that the physical body is different of a Jew is different than the physical body of a Gentile? So based on this discussion, at Mount Sinai, our physiology, our actual DNA became Jewish. Our body became a vehicle through which our Jewish spark would shine. And this explains why the Jewish descent stems from the mother. Because during a pregnancy, the fetus is eating everything of the mother. Whatever the mother eats, her blood, whatever she eats turns into her blood, her flesh, her limbs, everything from the baby is formed based on who the mother's body. So we know that everything that a mother does during a pregnancy, if she smokes, drugs, it affects the baby's formation, literally their physical, biological being. So the existence of a child is actually more greatly influenced by the nature of the mother. So to understand, to recap this segment, at Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, our physiology became Jewish. And that is what really, that is one of the things that actually occurred at the giving of the Torah. Now, what happened with the 10 Commandments? Well, let's go back to the beginning of our lesson. What mechanism did Hashem use to fuse this body and the soul? That the physical flesh and the godly soul would become one, would become Jewish. This was the Aseret HaDibros. This was the 10 Commandments. Because when Hashem says, I am your God, right? If you look at the words again in the Pasuk, Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher ha'isicha me'eretz Mitzrayim me'beis avodah. Famous first commandment. I am Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. It's very interesting that the first statement that Hashem says in the 10 Commandments, it says, I am Hashem your God. Hashem could have just said, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. What do you mean? I am Hashem, your God. Because this is, so to speak, that mission statement by setting the standard that this extra word shows that Hashem is saying, I'm integrating myself into you. By saying, I am Hashem, I'm not just a God up there. I'm Hashem, your God. I am actually a part inside of you. I'm integrating myself into you, that there's an actual part of me inside of you. And it's fused together. And this is why Hashem uttered the word on our terms, on the term Anochi in Egyptian, in a language that as Jewish people we were comfortable with at the time. We asked a question, did the Jewish people understand Hebrew? Yes, of course they understood Hebrew. After all, they maintained their Hebrew language. But Hashem sought to integrate himself within every facet of our being. And Hashem sought to integrate himself within the Egyptian aspect of our lives, within the parts of our DNA that are alienated from Hebrew, even in the parts of us that, so to speak, like the ones that learned the Egyptian language, because we know that Jewish people were strongly influenced by the Egyptian lifestyle. So when it came to the giving of the Torah, they had that Egyptian element still, so to speak, in their psyche. So by opening up the Aseret Hadibros, the 10 Commandments, with the word Anochi, Hashem is bringing himself all the way into the physical, biological existence that makes every single part of us, inside of us, Jewish. So that's why, number one, Hashem started with the word Anochi. And now we can understand, why does Hashem use the word Lamar? Why does it say the word to say, as if he's speaking to someone else? Hashem is saying, listen, I want you, Hashem is talking to the Jewish people. He says, I want you to say it to your non-Jewish flesh, so to speak. Hashem is telling us, not only are the 10 Commandments for you, for your soul, it's to your flesh as well. Both parts of us. See, at that time, our body and our soul were not united. They weren't fused together. So even though they both existed, they didn't communicate. You know, today, it's very hard for us to understand. What do you mean they didn't communicate? Body, soul, it's all together. In fact, today there's a whole movement about mind, body, spirit, soul, right? Fusing the two together. We know that comedy is the best medicine. How can my emotions affect my body? Why does that bring healing? But we don't realize that before the giving of the Torah, those two elements remained separate. And when the Torah was given, the Aseret Hadibros were given, our existence became an inseparable identity. And therefore, Hashem introduces the Aseret Hadibros. He tells us, Lamar, say to them, meaning communicate to ourselves that there's no separation. There's no part of ourselves that can be un-Jewish. From this moment forward, body and soul, the Aseret Hadibros was the matchmaker. And we know that this is a very, very powerful message that we can each apply into our own lives, because many times within our own lives, we compartmentalize Judaism. We do it all the time. We create like this artificial dichotomy between our Jewish life and our private life. You know, we might say, I'll give you 23 hours out of the day, but 1 hour, that's just for me. Hashem is telling us, when he gave the 10 Commandments, Lamar, to say, he's telling us that Judaism has to resonate within every nook, and I'm not finished. I'm gonna close the door, thank you. Resonate within every nook and cranny of our lives. And you know, Judaism is not meant to be something that's only in the synagogue, as I sit here alone in the synagogue. In your kitchens, in your living rooms, in your bedrooms, in your homes. It's one thing. I'm not a Jew here and not a Jew there. That's who I am. My soul can't separate from me. And by the way, even if we run away from it, it comes back. That part inside of us, it pops up everywhere. It could be in Publix. It could be when you're sitting home alone. It's anywhere. When you're taking a walk with your dog. That part of our neshama, our soul, our mission, our purpose, it's part and parcel with who we are. And after the giving of the Torah, this is when this actually happened. So that's number one. And lastly, this perspective actually gives us like an appreciation of why certain ones of the Aseret Hadibros were a mere repetition of the Noahide laws. Remember, we said that was our third question. Why are only some of them a repetition? Because the Noahide laws are given to all of mankind. And it's precisely certain prohibitions that Hashem sought to incorporate specifically on Mount Sinai. Now that we understand that the Aseret Hadibros, the time of Mount Sinai, is when we have this fusion of body and soul. So it's like obvious that there's certain mitzvos that are holy and godly. Kosher is a Jewish holy thing to do. Mikvah, you know, these are obviously Jewish, obviously holy. But it's not readily apparent that a commandment like thou shalt not murder relates to God. You know, there is a school of thought that, you know, I think in the Enlightenment movement, they believe that thou shalt not murder did not require God in order for it to be sustained. And if you think about it, you know, people argued alone that people should have an inner morality and ethical value that you're not going to kill. But we know that that's not true. Look at the Holocaust. That's just one example of where people were a society that were so devoid of holiness and morale and godliness that they convinced themselves that it was a moral thing to kill. So it's this reason that Hashem specifically chose these particular prohibitions, the ones that seem so obvious: don't steal, don't kill, don't cheat, that Hashem demonstrated that godliness is an all encompassing element in our lives. Everything, not just the holy stuff, not just the Jewish stuff, and even the parts of our lives that seem like, you know, on their own reasonable merit, so to speak, that, you know, we don't need Hashem to tell us not to steal. Every element of our lives needs to be saturated by holiness and Jewishness. And I just want to mention, and this conversation, by the way, it's so powerful, because each and every one of us in our own lives, I'm sure, can think of parts that we don't incorporate our Judaism. We think we separate ourselves. First of all, at Mount Sinai, the idea that this cup is now holy, because I'm holding it and I'm teaching Torah, because I can say a blessing on it and I can elevate it. That's something that did not exist before Matan Torah. That's something that could not exist before Matan Torah. But now every single element in our lives, body, soul, universe, physical beings, has the ability to be fused. It changes everything about the way we understand life. It changes everything about every element of our life, from the clothing we wear to the choices we make to the computer we're sitting at. Everything can be holy. Everything can be fused. That's why Hashem created this world. And we see that this last era, the 2000 years, that it says that Mashiach is going to come. Why is it that Mashiach didn't come yet, but we're in that era? Why are we in that era? Because we can see today how the fusion is happening so much more than ever before. The fact that we can take technology, computer, and you could sit at home alone during this pandemic and study Torah for hours and hours, it doesn't exist ever before in history. We're living in unbelievable times. I do want to mention that this Shabbos is usually the Shabbos that I go to the convention. Once a year, we have the Women's Convention where all the Rebbitzins get together. This year, it's going to be virtual. There's actually, by the way, a guest program that every year there's a guest program for people who, in communities worldwide, they have a special guest program where people come in to be part of it. But they're doing that virtually online as well. If there's anybody that would like to participate in this convention as a guest, it's a separate program than the shlochos, than the Rebbitzins. It's a different track. But they have unbelievable classes, workshops that you can select from. I'll post it on the WhatsApp group that we have. You can sign up. I don't think it's too late. It's really very, very special. But even if you don't do that, you should all watch the banquet on Sunday. The yearly banquet where it's open to the thing, and I'll post the link on the WhatsApp group. But the reason the convention was chosen to be always this weekend, every single year, because on the 22nd of the Hebrew month of Shvat, Chaf Bei Shvat, is the yard site of Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe's wife. That's who my daughter Mushka is named after. Her name was Chaya Mushka. And on the occasion of her first yard site, the Rebbe offered a very interesting thought.
the Rebbe basically explained what happens when a person passes away. The Jewish definition of death really is the separation between body and soul. When a person passes away, neither the body or the soul disappear. They just disconnect from each other and they return to their original source. The soul goes to heaven and the body goes to the earth. And generally speaking, after a person passes away, the soul can no longer make an imprint on this physical world, right? We spoke about this. That's what happens when a person passes away. But when a person of a tzaddik or a tzaddikis, a righteous person, according to Tanya, a tzaddik passes away, their soul continues to influence the physical world even after their passing. And the fact, and the Rebbe explained on the Rebbitzins' first yard site that her name was Chaya Mushka. Chaya means life. And her soul remains alive to a certain degree based on the statement of, there's a statement in the Talmud that says if her children are alive, then she is alive. But what this is specifically referring to is the word Chaya enumerates to the fact that by learning from who she was as a person, this makes her to a certain degree alive. And a tzaddik or a tzaddikis, they embody the essence really of the Aseret HaDibros, of the 10 Commandments, because a righteous person, they have attained a complete fusion, a complete integration of their body and their soul to the point that even after they pass away, that relationship still exists and affects the world. 99% of the people, it doesn't. Obviously, a person who is a special person, their legacy remains forever and you're affected by it forever. But we're talking specifically a tzaddik or a tzaddik is according to Tanya of what that means. Actually, they have that power. So I just wanted to mention that the Rebbe actually spoke about this concept on her first yard site about this idea of the fusion of the body and the soul. So we should take away from this, how are we going to infuse or allow this fusion of our body and soul to be integrated into our lives, where we can say, all of me is Jewish, that we can communicate, so to speak, to the Egyptian within ourselves, that Hashem is not just a God, Hashem is ours. And we need to think, how can we personalize this message? How can we personalize this idea that we are here to make a permanent spiritual impact in this world? So I want you to think about that. We're all going to think about that this week. And I hope that I will have you join me on Sunday when we watch this unbelievable banquet. You will be joined by thousands upon thousands, literally thousands upon thousands of women, Chabad Rebbitzins, and people in their community around the world are going to join in together and be united to watch this beautiful program. So let's go. Let's make it a good.
Who's going to be honored here?
Who's speaking this year? I have to check the program. You know, I was like a little bit like, I got the emails and the box and the mail and everything. And I was like, you know, I thought to myself, wow, what a pity we can't go in and unite and be together. There's nothing like that physical human interaction. So I didn't even like look at the program. Then this morning I woke up, I said, what am I talking about? Even though it's virtual, it's going to be amazing. So I actually have to look through the whole program. I'll send you the information. I'll post it. I'll keep you posted. Any questions? Wow, it's so late. I'm sorry. Oh, lots of things to think
It
about.
was a good class.
Thank you so much, Rivka. Good seeing the ladies.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Good to see you
Yes,
all.
thank you, Rivka.
Bye, Maria. Bye, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Have a good week, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.